Okay, so this is going to be the technology of World War One assignment we're going to go through together. We have the Google Forms and then also this article that's linked in. So technology during World War One was really a huge step from what warfare used to look like. So the technologies that came out around this time just completely revolutionized the way that wars fought. But there are a couple hindrances to the new technology as well. So the first question on your forms is, which of the following was not a reason for millions dead during the early days of World War One? So our options here are old-fashioned tactics and strategies, new technology, or more people. So more people would be talking about the amount of people fighting in the war, obviously, and also the population size of the world at this time versus other wars. But here it says one of the saddest facts about World War I is that millions died needlessly because military and civilian leaders were slow to adapt their old-fashioned strategies and tactics to new weapons of 1914. New technology made war more horrible and more complex than ever before. The United States and other countries felt the effects of war for years afterward. The popular image of World War I is soldiers in muddy trenches and dugouts living miserably until the next attack. And this is basically correct. Technological developments in engineering, metallurgy, chemistry, and optics had produced weapons deadlier than anything known before. The power of defensive weapons made winning the war on the Western Front all but impossible for the other side. So, because of trench warfare and because of the new technologies of the time, it made it very difficult for either side to make progress and to win a battle. So, that was also a reason that these battles dragged on for so long and why so many people died. So, we can go back to our answer here. And so they said that old fashioned tactics and strategies was a reason that millions of people died, as well as new technology. So, the answer here for what is not a reason would be more people. So the next question is, what was the name for the middle ground between the two trenches called? So we'll scroll down here. It says, when attacks were ordered, Allied soldiers went over the top, climbing out of their trenches and crossing no man's land to reach enemy trenches. They had to cut through belts of barbed wire before they could use rifles, bayonets, pistols, hand grenades to capture enemy positions. A victory usually meant they only seized a few hundred yards of shell-torn earth at terrible cost in lives. Wounded men often lay helpless in the open until they died. Those lucky enough to be rescued still faced horrible sanitary conditions before they could be taken to proper medical facilities. Between attacks, the snipers, artillery, and poison gas caused misery and death. So here it says that they would be crossing into no man's land. So that is what they called the area between the trenches. So they had to go over the top of the trench into no man's land. So no man's land is the answer for this question here. The next one says, initially, airplanes were used for what in World War I? So here we have airplanes in the next part. It says, products of the new technology were primarily made of canvas, wood, and wire. At first, they were used only to observe enemy troops. As their effectiveness became apparent, both sides shot down planes with artillery from the ground and with rifles, pistols, and machine guns from other planes. In 1916, the Germans armed planes with machine guns that could fire forward without shooting off fighters' propellers. The Allies soon armed their airplanes the same way, and the war in the air became a deadly business. These light, highly maneuverable fighter planes attacked each other in wild air battles called dogfights. Pilots who were shot down often remained trapped in their falling, burning planes, for they had no parachutes. Airmen at the front did not often live long. Germany also used its fleet of huge dirigibles and zeppelins and large bomber planes to drop bombs on British and French cities. Britain retaliated by bombing German cities. So they had this bombing campaign that went back and forth, all using airplanes. And airplanes had never been used in warfare before. Airplanes were pretty relatively new. So they said at the beginning they used, so it says initially, so that's your key word here. What were they used for? And it was for observing enemy troops. However, all these other options did happen just later on. So, which country was the first to mount these machine guns at the front of the plane? And we just read that it was Germany, and then other countries followed suit shortly after. What technology helped in the stalemate in Europe? So let's go back on. It says, back on the ground, the tank proved to be the answer to the stalemate in the trenches. This British invention used American design's Caterpillar tracks to move the armored vehicle equipped with machine guns and sometimes light cannon. Tanks worked effectively on firm, dry ground in spite of their slow speed, mechanical problems, and vulnerability to artillery. Able to crush barbed wire and cross trenches, tanks moved forward through machine gun fire and often terrified German soldiers with their unstoppable approach. So, tanks were what helped end the stalemate in Europe. So that's going to be your answer here. Where was the first place poison gas was used in World War I? So here this section is talking about chemical warfare. It says chemical warfare first appeared when the Germans used poison gas during a surprise attack in Flanders, Belgium in 1915. At first, gas was just released from large cylinders and carried by wind into nearby enemy lines. Later, phosgene and other gases were loaded into artillery shells and shot into enemy trenches. The Germans used this weapon the most, realizing that enemy soldiers wearing gas masks did not fight as well. All sides used gas frequently by 1918. Its use was a frightening development that caused its victims a great deal of suffering, if not death. So one of the things that chemical warfare does is it makes it very difficult for soldiers to be able to see and maneuver. So it kind of hindered the soldiers from being effective, and it made them easier targets. So chemical warfare was often deadly, often caused a lot of great suffering. If they wore their gas masks, though, it could be a deadly choice. So there was that, is it smarter to put this gas masks on and not fight well? Or is it smarter to, take your risk at the chemicals? Because both could end in death. So here we say that it started in Flanders. That was the answer given there. And in here, why did Germany decide to use poison gas? So gas was lethal, that caused death. Soldiers wearing gas masks didn't fight as well. Poison gas could cause blindness, and they didn't have enough ammo to fight in open ground. So as I said, it made the soldiers not fight as well, was a primary reason. The German super long-range artillery could destroy a target at how many miles away? So let's go look for that. It says both sides used a variety of big guns on the Western Front, ranging from huge naval guns mounted on railroad cars to short-range trench mortars. The result was a war in which soldiers near the front were seldom safe from artillery bombardment. The Germans used super long-range artillery to shell Paris from almost 80 miles away. Artillery shell blasts created vast, cratered, moon-like landscapes where beautiful fields and woods had once stood. So that would be 80 miles away, which is insane to think about. Which weapon was most significant technological innovation in World War I? So let's go back and see what they say. The Browning machine gun model 1917, 1918, North Carolina Museum of History. It says perhaps the most significant technological advance during World War I was the improvement of the machine gun, a weapon originally developed by an American, Hiram Maxim. The Germans recognized its military potential and had large numbers ready to use in 1914. They also developed air-cooled machine guns for airplanes and improved those used on the ground, making them lighter and easier to move. The weapon's full potential was demonstrated on the Somme battlefield in July of 1916, when German machine guns killed or wounded almost 60,000 British soldiers in one day. So this says killed or wounded, so that's the total there, but For just killed, the number is about 20,000. So, and they're giving that number to the machine gun. So definitely a deadly weapon in warfare. So machine gun is going to be the most significant. And it says, in addition to the millions killed in war, afterwards, millions more died of what factors? So we are going to read this just because it's here. It says, at sea, submarines attack ships from far port. In order to locate and sink German U-boats, British scientists developed underwater listening devices and underwater explosives called depth charges. Warships became faster and more powerful than ever before and used newly innovated radios to communicate effectively. The British naval blockade of Germany, which was made possible by developments in naval technology, brought a total war to civilians. The blockade caused a famine that finally brought about the collapse of Germany and its allies in late 1918. Starvation and malnutrition continued to take the lives of German adults and children for years after the war. The firing stopped on November 11, 1918, but modern war technology had changed the course of civilization. Millions had been killed, gassed, maimed, or starved. Famine and disease continued to rage through Central Europe, taking countless lives. Because of rapid technological advances in every area, the nature of warfare had changed forever, affecting soldiers, airmen, sailors, and civilians alike. So we go back to the question. They had famine and disease taking place after the war. So that is this part in this assignment. So, you guys, good job and get those submitted.